Okay. Hopefully we are, there we go, should be live. Fantastic. Welcome everybody. If you are here, welcome. We are going to get this live rocking and rolling. And welcome as you join. I know this is a busy time for feds with all, of course, the craziness getting back to work with the government shutdown coming back and the holidays. I know it's a busy time, but I know there's a lot of needs. I know there's a lot of questions about everything going on, about how retirement works, what it means potentially with you retiring, especially with TSP. So let's dive in. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. So in the chat, as you guys get rocking and rolling, let me know where you guys are at, whether it be if you're over on the East Coast, West Coast, somewhere in between. Let us know where you're at in the chat, and I'll dive in. Let me get my slides up here. Okay, fantastic. So the main topic of today that I'm going to cover during the main presentation portion of this is how to maximize your TSP in and around your retirement. And this is going to cover not just in retirement, but before retirement, because what I found is that for most folks, they tend to make the most mistakes right around retirement, whether it be the year before retirement or the year after. Right around there tends to be some major decisions on what you do with your TSP. So that's what I want to focus on today. And welcome on in everybody that you're throwing in where you're calling in from. I see a lot of Virginias, Arizonas, Vermont, Guam. Welcome. Always good to have all of you. And again, today we're going to focus on TSP. At the end of the presentation portion of today's call, we are going to do some Q&A. So if you hang on to the last 20 minutes or so of this training, and the entire training we're going to try to wrap up within an hour. So we'll be done at 2 p.m. my time, which I'm in Arizona, and so that is 4 p.m. Eastern is when we'll definitely be wrapping up. So save your questions and put your questions in the chat near the end of today's training, and we will definitely cover them. So let's dive in. Let's get my slides going. So many of you, I'm sure, know who I am, but just to give a very, very brief bio, I help feds retire every day. That's what I do. I am not a YouTuber first. I'm a financial planner first who happens to do YouTube to get the word out on how to get the most out of all this stuff. We publish hundreds of videos, articles all over the internet trying to get information and answers to federal employees like you guys. Agencies bring us out to train their employees about their retirement. We just do this stuff in all types of versions and forums all the time, and we love it. So let's dive in. Here's the problem. Here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Basically, like I mentioned before, right around retirement, federal employees tend to mess up their TSP. That is the big thing that we want to not happen to you. It's easy as you approach retirement to get emotional. I talk to retiring feds all the time, and you wouldn't believe how many times I hear the response of, while I was working, I didn't even pay attention to my TSP, but as I approached my retirement, I got nervous and I made decisions that I probably shouldn't make just because it gets emotional as you approach retirement. When you want to start living off this money, it's way easier to get emotional, and we definitely don't want that to happen to you, at least in a bad way. Right? We want you to make the good decision to get the most out of your money. Also, because TSP for most folks is pre-tax, right? Most of your TSP is probably in the traditional side. That means when money comes out, that's a taxable event. And whenever there's taxes involved, how you do things really starts to matter. Also, in retirement is when you have the opportunities to buy annuities and make other big mistakes. So we're going to go over how to solve all these big problems today. All right, so let's dive in. Here are some big things we're going to learn. Number one, we're going to learn how to avoid the pitfalls. Basically, retirement planning and maximizing your TSP, there's two pieces to it. There's avoiding the negative, but then also doing the good things as well. We got to avoid the pitfalls and then pursue actively the strategies that means you're going to get the most out of your money. So we're going to talk about avoiding the negative and doing the positive with your TSP. So to make sure you never run out of money before you want to, okay? So let's start with the pitfalls to avoid. The goal is to make sure you don't have any big investment or tax messes in your retirement. And here's one big problem I see as people approach retirement. Now, one thing I will say, while I am a financial planner, that's what I do. I help clients with this stuff, help them invest and with taxes and get the most out of their federal benefits. That's what I do. I will say I am probably not your financial planner unless you're one of my clients here, okay? So just keep all the things we're going to talk about today is for educational purposes only. At the end of the day, I don't know your situation. And so make sure you tailor what we talk about today to your situation. Don't take anything I say blindly and just run with it. Make sure you tailor it for you. So, but generally speaking, I have seen almost zero situations where someone should be 100% in the G fund around retirement, even in retirement. I hear it so often that people approach retirement and they say, okay, it's time to go 100% G fund. Here's the problem. If your goal is for your money to not really grow much over the course of your retirement, the G fund will get that done. But if your goal is to make sure your money keeps up with inflation and actually beats inflation over time, make sure you never run out, and no matter how long you live, the money's always there for you with a decent amount of buying power. If that's what you want in retirement, 100% G fund doesn't do that for most folks. And so we've got to have a balance. Now, you can err on the other side as well. If you're too aggressive, I mean, if you invest only in stock-based funds right around retirement, I hear all the time people are trying to make up time, especially if they're a late bloomer when it comes to savings. They're trying to make up time. They're trying to be really aggressive near the end, which again works great as long as the market's doing well. But what if there's a big downturn in the market, which it's just a matter of when they happen, right? It's a part of life. So it's possible to err on both sides of trying to be too conservative or being too aggressive with your investments. And you want to make sure you find the balance for you. For most folks, they need to have some conservative money and some aggressive money and to have a balance. We'll talk about that more in depth in just a bit, but just know you don't want to err to either side because they both have problems. They both have problems. Now, the next mistake we see all the time is trying to time the market. Now, most people don't actually use those words of, hey, I'm about to try to time the market. But in essence, that's what many people try to do when you move all to the G fund when you think the market's going to go down. Or you move all to the C fund because, hey, you think there's going to be a big rush. Whatever it is, if you think you know when the next downturn or thing is going to happen in the stock market, that's very difficult to do. Even if you're a professional, even if this is all you do, the odds of you being right about the market going up, down, sideways is just low. And you may get lucky once or twice, but doing it consistently over time is basically impossible. It's way better to have a solid plan and to stick with the plan. To stick with the plan over your retirement. And we'll talk about what that probably should look like, having a great plan. But you want to make sure, again, avoid being too conservative, being too aggressive, or trying to time the market. It just doesn't work out very well. I've got a very interesting vantage point where I see people retire and go throughout the retirement. That's my job, right? That's what I do. And so I see all the bad mistakes that happen when you follow any or you make any of these big errors, okay? Now, here's another problem that we want you to avoid. TSP tax bomb. Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. Let me just share an example. Let's say that you retire, right? And you have access to your TSP for the first time, which is great. The money's there to be used. What many people do is they immediately say, well, what if I pay off my mortgage, right? I don't want to have a mortgage in retirement. That's a good thing. Let's get that paid off. Or maybe I want to buy that retirement home or that boat, whatever it is. People tend to take big withdrawals early in retirement. Now, at the end of the day, it's your money. You can do whatever you'd like, right? However, there's a couple things to keep in mind so you actually get the most out of your money. Number one, this is one of the biggest reasons you want to avoid big withdrawals in a single tax year. Let me give you an example. Let's say you go into retirement and you've got, of course, let's say you've got your pension. So let's say this is your pension worth of income. Let's say you've got some Social Security as well. So that's Social Security. So that's how much income you have there. And then what if one year you take out a bunch of money from TSP to pay off a mortgage? Let's say you owe $100,000 on your mortgage, right? And you say, man, it's just $100,000. Let's say you've got $1 million in TSP. Well, look, I'll just take $100,000 out of my TSP, get that paid off, knocked out, and we're good to go. Well, let's say you do request a withdrawal of $100,000 from TSP. How much would they actually send you after taxes? Well, it depends on your tax bracket, but let's say they send you $80,000 after taxes. Well, you actually need to take out much more than $100,000 to be left with $100,000 net after taxes to actually pay off the mortgage. So maybe you got to take out $130,000 or whatever the number is. So you have to take out $130,000 to pay off the mortgage. And basically looking at your taxes, this is what it might look like, where you have years and then boom, you've got a big spike in your income because you just added $130,000 to your taxable income that year. Because whenever you take money from the traditional TSP, it's taxable. It counts as taxable income. So if you have a big spike in your income, almost certainly it's going to put you into a higher tax bracket, at least for most people. And so you just want to be careful as you're planning withdrawals that it doesn't push you into a higher tax bracket, and meaning you have to pay more to taxes than you otherwise would. One strategy you can use to avoid the high tax brackets is maybe spread the withdrawals out into multiple tax years. So if you need $100,000 net to pay off a mortgage, what if you took half the withdrawal one year and half the withdrawal the next year? That can really help ease some of the problems with taking a big spike in income one year. And honestly, for tax planning purposes, that's a great principle to follow. You don't want big peaks and valleys in your income throughout retirement. You want to smooth things out. When there's peaks and valleys, almost certainly there's extra taxes you're paying if there's peaks and valleys in your retirement income. You want to try to smooth things out over time. Now, buying annuities. Now, here's the deal. This is another one where I don't know your situation. I don't know what actually makes sense, but I do know that there are a ton of companies that teach federal agency trainings about retirement that offer quote unquote free consultations. And then if you go in, they will sell you an annuity. Now, let me explain what an annuity is just for everyone if you're not familiar. Basically, an annuity is you take a piece of your TSP or all of your TSP and you stick it over into this annuity, this product. And I'm just going to make these numbers up for a second. Okay, let's say you hand over $300,000. And in exchange, they will guarantee a monthly income of $3,000 for the rest of your life. Again, those numbers aren't actually what you'd get. It's just a made up number, okay? Just for the example. So basically, you give up a lump sum of your money in exchange for some guarantee of some sort, whether a certain growth rate or a downside protection on the market or a monthly payment. Basically, you give up some control in exchange for a monthly guarantee, something guaranteed. You lose flexibility and options. And here's the deal. I won't go through all the reasons why, because just for time, but just know for most federal employees, most federal retirees, you don't need to buy an annuity. You don't need it. Because you already have some great fixed income. You have normally your federal pension, you've got Social Security, many of you have military retirements and VA disability or rental income. Most people just don't need, on top of that, another pension, which that's what an annuity is basically. You're buying a pension. What most federal employees need is flexible investments, right? That's what TSP is so good at in your retirement, is it's flexible. You can use more of it today or less of it today or more later. It's flexible. You can turn it on and off. That's the beauty of investments, is you can adjust over time. Because look, here's the deal. Today, let's say you're 60 years old today and you're retiring. 30 years ago when you were 30, would you have known exactly what your desires and wishes and preferences were today at 60? No, right? And if you try to guess what your future desires and needs will be in 20, 30 years, and you lock yourself in with an annuity by doing so, you're probably going to be wrong, right? The key of retirement planning is being flexible. having options down the road. That's what it's all about. We don't know what the future holds, but you can set yourself up with options. And that's what you want to make sure you have. So the problem I have with annuities is not that they're bad things in general. No, it's just they take away options, and most Feds don't need it. They don't need it. Okay? Now that we've talked about some of the big problems and mistakes people make with their TSP, let's talk about some of the strategies that people actually will want to do. All right, let's talk about it. So you want to have an investment plan, right? And I mentioned this earlier. What is your plan on investments? Most people just kind of eyeball this. Most people just talk to their coworker and say, what are you doing? Most people just don't have a plan. We here at the firm, we use a strategy called the bucket strategy. There's lots of different strategies out there, but this strategy works great. It works great. Let me show you basically the strategy that we use. Whenever we've got a client approaching retirement or into retirement, we always break things down into a short-term bucket and a long-term bucket, okay? Short-term bucket and long-term bucket. And this is our rule of thumb. Any money that a client might need in the next 6 to 8 years, we want to keep in the short-term bucket. So let me give you an example of what that means. Let's say, just to make my math really easy, let's say a client was planning to spend $10,000 a year from their TSP. So that's on top of their pension, on top of their first supplement or Social Security. It's on top of all that. They want to take $10,000 a year of withdrawals. So if we want 8 years worth of money in the short-term bucket, that means 10,000 multiplied by 8 would be 80,000. That means if they had 80 grand in the short-term bucket, their needs would be good for the next 8 years. Basically, any types of withdrawals you might need from TSP in the next 6 to 8 years, that's what we generally recommend to have in the short-term bucket. And then the long-term bucket is money you don't need for a while, about 6 to 8 plus years, right? Down the road. The long-term bucket is invested much more aggressively. It's invested in things like the S fund, the C fund, the I fund, etc. The short-term bucket is invested in things like the G fund or the F fund. And having that combination of some short-term and some long-term is incredibly powerful on a couple of fronts. Number one, we know that the long-term bucket or the CS&I doesn't go up every year. Some years are bad, right? If the markets are down, you want to have some short-term money that you can live off in the meantime. But at the same time, this long-term bucket will be the thing that will actually beat inflation and make sure you never run out over time. So having a good mix between the two is really, really critical. Now, this is one thing that is incredibly important. Incredibly important is don't draw down the long-term money when the market is down. Let me explain what I'm talking about. So, like I just explained, you should have a long-term bucket and a short-term bucket in retirement. But what happens if the market goes up and down? Let's say the market's down, right? The market's down. You don't want to take the withdrawal out of the long-term bucket when the market's down. Because if you take a withdrawal out when the market's down, that's like selling when things are down. It's like, let's say your home is worth $500,000. If there's a housing crash and your house is only worth 300 grand, that's not a good time to sell. Same is true for TSP. If the market's down, you don't want to have to pull money out of the long-term bucket when that happens. That's a bad idea, right? So you only want to pull from the short-term side. Well, the problem is TSP kind of makes this kind of hard to do. I hope they make this change in the future, but right now they haven't. Basically, if you take a withdrawal from TSP, they're going to pull it proportional from however you're invested. So if you've got some C fund and some G fund, they're going to pull it from proportional from both of those funds. Which again, if the C fund is down, if it's not doing well, that's like selling when things are down. If the market's up, hey, great. Doesn't matter really if you pull from the C fund. It's when the market's down that's a problem. Now, just for time's sake, I'm not going to talk through all the workarounds on this. Basically, there's two ways to get around this problem that the TSP has where it forces proportional withdrawals. You can move to an IRA where there's more flexibility, or you can kind of move things around in TSP to make it work. It's a couple steps. It's kind of a pain, but it does work. I've got YouTube videos on it. You can go to the channel and check those out. But I just wanted to mention that makes a big difference over time. Okay, let's talk about a tax plan. TSP, like I mentioned before, is inseparably tied to taxes. We can't talk about TSP and not talk about taxes. So, what are some things you can do to reduce your taxes on TSP over time? I'm not going to explain all these things really in depth just for time. I want to have plenty of time for questions at the end of this. But I'm just going to mention some of them so at least you know about them and you can do more research. We've got full videos on all these things, okay? Number one, Roth conversions. To put it simply, that's moving money from the traditional TSP over to the Roth over time. Now, fortunately, the TSP is coming a long way, and they're adding this option in retirement, or in 2026 rather. You can do Roth conversion within the TSP, which is nice. It's not, there's still limitations on how it can be implemented, but overall, it's nice that they have that option, okay? Next, asset location. Okay, now this is one that some people think they've heard about, but most people actually haven't. What am I talking about? So let me give you an example. Let's say right now you've got some traditional TSP, and let's say you've also started using the Roth TSP. And honestly, this strategy I'm about to share, just this one strategy can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes if you do it right. Okay, it can make a massive difference. So let's say, again, you've got some traditional TSP and some Roth TSP. In the TSP, they require that you invest both of these sides the same way. So if the traditional TSP is partly in the G fund and partly in the C fund, then the Roth is going to also be in the G fund and C fund. They have to be invested identically. However, as I'm sure you know, the Roth TSP, when you get growth there, that's tax-free growth. When you get growth in the traditional, that's taxable growth, right? All the growth that happens in the traditional is taxable. It is taxable. So, based on that, if we can just write the rules, how would we invest? Well, if it was me, I would want my Roth TSP to be only in my long-term bucket, to be 100% long-term, to get as much tax-free growth as I can, and I'd put my more short-term in the traditional TSP. That's what I would do. So that over time, your Roth is going to grow more because it's in the long-term bucket, right? Focus on CS and I. And the traditional is more focused on, let's say, the G and F, right? Doing that one thing means your Roth will grow more over time, which means more tax-free growth for you. More tax-free money for you throughout your retirement. However, again, the TSP doesn't allow you to break this out. However, if you move your Roth TSP to a Roth IRA, you can then invest it however you'd like. So that's how many people break that out and invest it in a way that's optimized for the Roth. I've got whole videos on IRAs. If you're not familiar with those, you can check those out. They're not perfect for everybody, but there's some things like this that it makes it really, really nice. Right? There's some really great strategies that TSP just doesn't allow. Okay? Let me clean up my pictures. It's getting messy here. Let me erase. Okay. Let's talk about RMDs and QCDs. So we got to love all the acronyms, right? There's always an acronym for everything. If you're not familiar, RMDs are basically in your 70s. For many of you, it's going to be age 73 or 75. You can find it based on your birthday. Basically, once you hit your RMD age, and you can just Google, what is my RMD age, and you can find it. Once you hit that age, you're going to be required to pull money out of your TSP, your traditional TSP or traditional IRA or traditional any accounts that you have. You're going to be required to start pulling money out of these accounts, whether or not you want to or not. And the amount you're required to withdraw goes up over time. So this isn't a huge deal for everybody, but for the people, but there's a certain group of people which is a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And let me explain. If the vast majority of your money is pre-tax, meaning traditional TSP, then it means the vast majority of your money is going to be subject to RMDs. You're going to be required to pull the money out and pay taxes on it. And especially sadly, this affects savers more than anybody. There's a type of person that was really good at saving, so they saved a ton into TSP. They got a really healthy TSP, and they aren't really good at spending it in retirement. So it means their TSP just continues to grow and grow and grow, which is a great problem to have. But tax-wise, come RMDs, sometimes once they hit RMD age, boom, their tax bracket just skyrockets because they're now being required to take way more out than they otherwise would have by themselves. So it's something to know about, right? Now you can reduce RMDs by doing Roth conversions because Roth accounts aren't subject to RMDs. So again, I'm not going to go into all these strategies in depth because we'd be here all day. The main goal is just to introduce you to a few things so you can dive into the things that are most relevant for you. And by the way, if you're charitably inclined, like if you give to charity on a regular basis, look up QCDs. It's a fantastic way to give to charity while getting the absolute most tax benefit possible. I'm not going to dive into the details of it, but just know that a QCD is a great way to give to charity. So also, right, another question to ask is, what if you are worried about your kids or your heirs or maybe your spouse? Are you familiar with the tax problems that you may or may not be saddling them with? If you leave TSP, Roth TSP, a house, this or that, if you leave certain types of assets, are you familiar with the tax implications of those assets? I'm not going to go into every type of asset, right, of exactly what the tax implication is, but let me explain TSP since we're talking about TSP. Let's say you leave your TSP to your spouse, okay? Let's say. Generally speaking, your spouse can treat that TSP as if it was their own. They can keep it in there. They can just basically treat it as their own. However, if it goes to anyone other than a spouse, so a non-spouse like kids or something like that, the kids generally have 10 years to get all the money out of the account. So if you pass $1 million to your kids, they've got 10 years to have that entire 10 million pulled out, taxes paid, everything. Okay? That's the current rules. The current rules. Again, every type of asset, like a house or other things, has different tax implications if you pass it to someone. So if that's important to you, make sure you understand the ramifications. Make sure your heirs, more importantly, understand the tax ramifications of certain assets. All right? Now, someone mentioned in the chat that you can't do QCDs from TSP, and that's exactly right, but you can from IRAs, okay? I've got whole videos on TSP versus IRA, and I'll give you the short version here. Is TSP is exceptional at being simple, easy to use. IRAs are harder to use because there's way more options. Way more options. There's way more things you can do, but when you add 1,000 options, you add more ways you can mess up, right? So it depends what your goals are and how competent you are at these different things, okay? Okay. Here are the 3 main ways you can manage your investments in retirement. Because honestly, when I talk to people, this is one of the biggest questions I get asked all the time is, what do I do with my TSP? What are the best options? Should I stay in TSP? Should I move to an IRA? Should I hire a financial planner? What should I do? Let me talk you through the main pros and cons. And believe me, there's no perfect fit for everybody, okay? There just isn't. Like I mentioned before, if you stay in TSP, the complexity is low. It's simple. You're used to it. That's a huge pro. The options are relatively low as well. Those options are all great, but there's few options, right? Overall, I'm a huge fan of TSP. TSP is great at a ton of things. You can use an IRA where, again, the options are exceptionally high. There's tons of investment options. For withdrawals, there's way more ways you can pull money out. Roth conversions are easier. You can do QCDs. There's so many more things you can do in IRAs, but the complexity is high, right? So if someone came to me and said, look, I definitely want to do this all myself. I don't want to hire help. I want to do it myself. And I don't really know this stuff very well. I would probably recommend they stay in TSP. Yes, there's few options, but again, there's fewer ways to mess it up, which is helpful, right? The last way, many clients come to us and they want us to help manage their investments for them in IRAs and stuff in retirement. We're not a fit for everybody, and not everyone wants or needs a financial planner. But in that case, we're able to help them get the most of those options. And for at least for the client, the complexity is low. We manage the complexity. So it depends what you're looking for and what you want when it comes to how you want to manage TSP. None of these options are perfect for everybody. It depends if you want to do it yourself, if you want to keep it as simple as possible, or if you want some of the better, there's more options, right? For tax strategies, for investment options, IRAs have that kind of stuff. But you have to be okay with the higher complexity that comes with it. Okay, so let's do this. Let's do some Q&A. So for those here in the chat, and by the way, I'm not going to watch the chat or scroll the chat back to what you had sent in previously, okay? But I'm going to start looking at the chat right now. Start putting in your questions on any of this stuff. And if you have questions outside TSP, that's okay, whatever. Obviously today the training was focused on TSP, but if your questions are outside of that, it's okay. As long as it's within my financial planning scope, I'm happy to at least give my thoughts as best I can. Okay, let's see here what questions we've got. Okay, so someone asks about L funds. Okay, so Mela Uzan 4050 asked about L funds of, hey, can't I just use an L fund? Isn't that a simple way to manage money in TSP? Stick it in an L fund and it just does it for me. So there's pros and cons of an L fund. Basically, and let me actually get here we go, just the camera. With an L fund, yes, they do it for you. The problem is, what if what they do for you isn't a good fit for you? What if it's not perfect, right? And what we find for most feds, if you just stick in the L funds like you're kind of supposed to, it tends to get way too conservative. Way too much in the G fund and F fund, which means over the course of your retirement, it just doesn't grow very much. It doesn't really do a good job at beating inflation and making sure your money never runs out. So the L funds can be helpful. Just make sure it actually aligns with how you want to be invested, and then L funds are fine. Okay? Okay. Someone says, what about fixed indexed annuities? A lot of federal advisors have been pushing those products now that I'm retiring. Yeah, exactly right. So there's tons of firms that their whole business model is go teach trainings for federal agencies and then sell annuities. That's what they do. So like I mentioned during my training, annuities as a product, they're not inherently evil, right? They're not bad, but most feds don't need them because you already have a pension, you already have Social Security, you already have some great fixed income. Most feds don't need something on top of that. What most feds need is they need to keep their money liquid, right? And flexible. So most feds in my experience, probably shouldn't be thinking about a fixed indexed annuity, all right? All right, next question by, let's see, Joy Narmore. How often do we rebalance between C and G when taking monthly withdrawals? So good question. It depends how much movement there is in those investments, meaning if the overall percentages that you're invested in are about where you want them, don't need to rebalance, right? But if things get really wacky, if the market is way up or down, maybe you want to rebalance. And as a general rule, I think rebalancing about once a year is normally plenty. Okay, someone says, can you pull money out of your TSP after 59.5, but before you retire? Yes, you can. If you're still working, but you're after 59.5, you can pull money out without penalty. That's an in-service withdrawal. Again, that's taxable, right? But you can do it. Not necessarily, I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying you can do it. You can do it. Okay, someone says, I am retired and currently have 60% G fund and 40% C. No plans to withdraw in the next few years. Is this okay? So good question. Right now, again, 60% of your money is in G, which just know that money's probably going to maybe keep up with inflation. Maybe, right? And so most people, if you don't really need your money for a while, generally speaking, want to be more growth oriented. I don't know what your goals are and what your plans are for your money. But generally speaking, that'd probably be a little conservative for most folks based on what I know about you, which of course isn't much. Okay. Manny Gonzalez says, 7 months from retirement, should I explore upcoming Roth conversions in TSP in January? Or is the process better in a IRA Roth after retirement? So great question. In a Roth IRA, the Roth conversions, there's just more ways to do it. So certainly in our experience, we prefer doing it in IRAs because there's just more flexibility. However, in general, I would probably not worry about Roth conversions until retirement. You mentioned, again, I think it was Manny, You mentioned that you're still 7 months from retirement. So while you're still working, if you want Roth, just contribute into the Roth TSP. Just contribute to it. After retirement is when most people should be thinking about Roth conversions. So in retirement, if you want to do Roth conversions, great. And TSP does Roth conversions. Again, it's not as flexible, but it'll get the job done. Next question. Okay, Bryant Bullock says 35 years all in C fund, retiring within the next 2 years. Should I switch any to Roth? Okay, Bryant, good question. So the short answer is I don't know what you should do, but this is how you should think about it. Moving to Roth means paying taxes now. That's what it means. And if you're in the last couple of years of your retirement, my guess is you're at the peak earning years of your career. It's my guess. So it may not be the time that you want to pay more taxes when you're in a high tax bracket, but that may not be you. Maybe you're only working part-time. I don't know. Generally speaking, let me actually get my screen back up. So generally speaking, let's say again, this is your retirement. What happens for most people as their income goes up during their career, right? Your income keeps going up during your career. And for most people, it kind of does this, right? Where in retirement, it kind of dips a little bit. Not everybody, but for most people, kind of dips a little bit and then goes up after that. If you're at the tippity top of your working career and you're making as much as you're going to make, you may not want to do Roth at that point, right? But it depends what tax bracket you're in compared to what you will be in retirement. Food for thought. Again, I don't know your situation, but that's food for thought. Now, another thing to consider, Brian, that you didn't ask about, but I'm going to speak to, is you mentioned that you're 100% C fund, okay? 100% C fund. So one thing that we're seeing a lot these days, and you probably know this, but the C fund is invested in what they call the S&P 500, which it's the 500 biggest companies in the US. That's what the C fund is. So if you have money in the C fund, you're invested in the 500 biggest companies in the US. However, your money isn't spread out evenly amongst those 500 companies. It's spread proportional to how big the company is, meaning the bigger companies get more of your money. And right now, for example, the 10 biggest companies make up about 35% of all 500, right? Meaning if you have all your money in the C fund, you've got 35% in only 10 companies, which means you're taking on a lot of risk if those 10 companies happen to do poorly. I'm a huge proponent of being really well diversified. You've got your money in a whole bunch of different baskets. So if one basket does poorly, you're going to be okay. And that's ever more important as you go throughout your retirement. So food for thought. All right. Let's take a look at these other questions. Okay, so F Baza 597 says, can you open a Roth IRA if retired and not working? So great question. Yes, you can always open an IRA. You can always open a Roth IRA and IRA. You can always do that. Now, you cannot put new contributions into an IRA if you're not working. Let me explain what I mean. You can always move money from TSP into an IRA. If you're moving existing retirement money from a TSP or something like that to an IRA, that you can do that at any time. Working, non-working, doesn't matter. If you want to take money that's never been in a retirement account and stick that in an IRA, you cannot do that if you're not working. So you can't put new dollars in, but dollars that were from a TSP or something, you can always do that. That's always an option. All right, Steve Tegmeyer asked, is it better to stay in the TSP if you are retired under age 59 and a half versus switching? Steve, I'm glad you brought this up. This is a great point. Great point. So if you're under 59 and a half, this is one advantage that TSP definitely has. And that the TSP allows you in many cases to withdraw money before 59 and a half without the normal 10% penalty that normally applies. Let me explain what I'm talking about. In an IRA, and actually in TSP in general for retirement accounts, if you pull money out before 59 and a half, you have to pay taxes, but also a 10% penalty. But there's a couple exceptions to that. Number one, the TSP has an exception called the Rule of 55, which says if you retire in the year you turn 55 or later, you can access the TSP immediately. So let me give you an example. If you retired January 2025, and let's say you turned 55 in June 2025. So that means you retired in the year you turned 55 or later, then great. You can take withdrawals throughout your retirement even before 59 and a half without penalty. However, let me give another example. Let's say you retired this year, 2025, but you don't turn 55 until next year, 2026. Some people think that, oh, well, I'll just retire now and then start accessing TSP once I'm 55. But that's not how it works. It's an all or nothing rule, meaning you have to retire in the year you turn 55 or later to get penalty-free withdrawals. Or if you retire before then, at let's say 54, you've got to wait all the way till 59 and a half. It's an all or nothing rule. Either you get the rule of 55 or you don't. And if you don't, you got to wait all the way till 59 and a half. Now, there is an exception, another exception to this rule, and that is for special provision. So if you are a firefighter, law enforcement, air traffic control, you can actually access TSP as long as you're eligible for a full-blown retirement. So if you're under 59 and a half, you're going to want to keep at least some money in TSP if you're planning on taking withdrawals before 59 and a half. What some people do if they want to take advantage of some of the things that IRAs have to offer is they move some of their money over to an IRA while keeping some in TSP for withdrawals before 59 and a half. So you got to find the balance for you. Before 59 and a half, though, again, you probably want to keep some in TSP. After 59 and a half, there's potentially less reasons if your goal is to get out of TSP. If that's your goal, it depends what your goal is. Again, leaving TSP is not perfect for everybody. Depends what the goal is. All right, let's look at some more questions. Okay, we got a question that says traditional TSP to traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. Can you do that? No, can you do that? Can you save taxes? Is there a backdoor Roth? So, okay, I'm not sure I understand your question exactly, but yes, if you want to move from traditional TSP to a traditional IRA, you can do that. Let me actually clean this up. So if you want to go traditional TSP and you want to move to a traditional IRA, you can do that. And if you do that, there's no tax implications at all. It's traditional to traditional. No tax implications. Then if you want to do the Roth conversion, you can go to a Roth IRA. And then you would pay the taxes on that transfer. But again, within IRAs, there's more flexibility on how and when you pay the taxes when you do it within an IRA. If you do a Roth conversion within TSP, it's fairly limited, but I'm glad it's an option. Okay. SF Jarhead 4062. I love these names, by the way. These are awesome. Says, is the RMD the same for traditional versus Roth? So this is a great question. No, not at all. So a traditional account has RMDs. A Roth account has 0 RMDs. Roth money, whether Roth TSP or Roth IRA, is not subject to RMDs. So that's a huge advantage of the Roth. Next question. Best to put short-term bucket funds in an IRA versus high-yield savings account versus CD, etc. It's a good question. Whenever you take money out of an IRA to put money in CDs or other things, that means you had to take it out and pay taxes on it. Generally speaking, you don't want to leave the TSP or leave the IRA like as a withdrawal until you're ready to spend that money, generally speaking. Because it's nice to let that money keep growing tax deferred or tax free for as long as possible. Okay, someone says, can you put a RMD in a Roth IRA? So good question. So let me explain this. Let me draw this out for everyone here. So let's say let's start with traditional. Let's say you've got traditional TSP. Again, down the road, you're going to have RMDs, which requires you to take the withdrawals out. So as I understand this question, the question is, okay, Well, the amount of money that I take out for RMDs, can't I just go ahead and stick that in a Roth, right? Basically turn it into a Roth conversion? The answer is no, you can't. If money is required to come out for RMDs, that money has to come out, taxes paid, and you can't put it into a Roth. Once you've already satisfied the RMDs, you can put additional withdrawals into the Roth, but not the RMD money. So that's the power of doing Roth conversions, getting money to Roth before RMDs start. Once you hit that age that RMDs start for you, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. So if you're going to do Roth conversions, probably want to start them before you do RMDs or get to RMDs. Okay. So Jennifer Morris says, can you address planning fees, assets under management versus fee per service? Great question. So what I assume Jennifer's asking about is hiring a financial planner. There's different types of financial planners out there. We already addressed one of them, right? One type of planner sells products, and they get a commission on the products they sell, whether it be life insurance or annuities. Those are the most common here in the industry, right? Where you don't necessarily pay the advisor directly, you pay them by buying the product they sell, and they get a commission. That's one type of advisor that sells products. And this advisor is perfect if you're looking for the product that they sell. Then it lines up perfect. But if you're looking to go to them for financial advice, it may not be a best fit simply because they're incentivized to sell what product they have, whether or not it's perfect for you. As they say, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you sell annuities, every problem looks like the annuity is the solution, right? And so it just depends what you're looking for. So that's one, is some advisors sell annuities. They sell products, okay? Other advisors will just have basically say, look, if you pay us X amount, we'll do this financial planning for you. Or you pay us X amount, we'll build a financial plan for you. Or we'll charge you a monthly fee and we'll be your financial planner. There's a million different variations, but it's basically just a fee per service thing. Like you pay us this money, cash, right? And we'll do whatever, insert whatever service you're looking for. And then there's another type that manages money, meaning they will help manage your IRA and they'll charge a percentage of what they manage to actually do the investing and the tax strategies and things for you, okay? Now, keep in mind that there's a lot of variation between all of these. Like some advisors can do some of both and some of this, and there's variation between all of it. It's kind of like in the doctor world, the medical space, there's all kinds of different doctors, right? There's heart doctors and brain surgeons, and there's so many different types. On the financial planning world, there's that as well. We all have our different specialties and we do different things. We have different models. There's just all different models. So whenever you're hiring somebody or looking to hire someone, these are the questions you want to make sure you understand is what's their model, right? What do they do? And does it line up with what you're looking for? If so, great. But not every advisor, even us, right? We've got to pick a model that we use and it's not a perfect fit for everybody. It just depends what people want, okay? Let's see what other questions we got. So, let's see here. SF Jarhead again says, what's the yearly max for Roth IRA? So great question. What I assume they're asking is what's the yearly max for getting money over to a Roth IRA with a Roth conversion? That's what I assume they're asking. So that's what I'm going to answer. There is no limit. Meaning any money from a traditional account, like traditional TSP or traditional IRA, you can move as much of that as you want into a Roth. The only limiter is your own desire to pay taxes now. And that's a reason where you don't want to overdo Roth conversions year by year, because anything you move to Roth, that's fully taxable and may put you into a higher tax bracket. So it's a balancing act. Yes, you want to get money over to Roth, but not too quickly, because if you do it too quickly, you're putting yourself into a higher tax bracket. All right. So hopefully that answered the question. Let's take a look here. Okay, Rodney Thompson says, can I put my money from a RMD into a QCD? Again, all those acronyms. Then file the QCD distribution on my taxes as a charitable contribution. So yes, Rodney, that's exactly how QCDs actually work, is you take what would have been your RMD, you send it to the charity of your choice, and then that income doesn't show up at all. It doesn't impact your taxes at all, which is great. So basically the biggest thing you have to know is it has to go directly from your IRA to that charity. So you want to make sure you do it right, but yes, that's exactly how it works. Let's take a look. Let me just do a couple more questions and then I'll wrap up for the day, okay? Get you guys back to your afternoon. Let me take a look. I want to get some good ones. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Okay, someone asked, can you tell me how much money I should pull out per year from my TSP? I have 165,000, retired 66, and on Social Security to keep my lower. Okay, so good question. When it comes to how much you should pull out of your TSP for tax purposes to keep you in a lower tax bracket, I have no clue. I don't know what your other income is, your filing status. I have absolutely no clue. But I can answer the question in terms of how much can you reasonably pull out without having to worry about running out before you pass away, right? Because we don't want that. I could certainly speak to that. So there's certainly no perfect strategy here, but at least for planning purposes, a great rule of thumb to use is the 4% rule. All right. So as a simplified example, if someone's got $500,000, 500,000, if you multiply it by 4%, you get 20,000. Meaning, using the 4% rule, you can very conservatively withdraw 20,000 a year from this nest egg every year for the rest of your life. Okay. Now, I understand this is not perfect for everybody. Some people need more early in retirement. Some people need less. I get it. I get this is not universal. Totally understand. But it's a good place to start for planning. Meaning, you can run your numbers, say, hey, would I be okay if that's all I took out? And if your retirement numbers look really tight with you only taking 4% out of your investments, then that maybe not a good thing, right? You want to make sure at least on paper, your plan would work with about a 4% withdrawal rate. Or unless you're like 95. If you're 95 years old, then yeah, you can take out a lot more than 4%, okay, and be okay. Unless you're going to live to 120. It depends. Depends how long you're going to live. All right, last question, and then I will let you guys go. Let's see what we got here. Okay, and this is, let's see, Kurt Rudolph says Medicare Part B will double in annual premiums if your income goes from 103 to 161. So that brings up a great point, which I haven't really addressed, is that once you're 65 plus, Medicare comes into the picture. And long story short, most feds actually get quite a bit of benefit for being on Medicare. And Medicare Part B costs go up with your income. Now, this is not going to be a comprehensive look at Medicare and your FEHB and how they work together. I've got whole videos on that. You can check it out. But just know that as your income goes up, so does your Medicare Part B premiums, what you pay for Medicare. So what you take out from TSP can impact your Medicare premiums because you take money from TSP, your taxable income goes up, and so does potentially your Medicare premium. So that's another thing to keep in mind as you take withdrawals throughout retirement is ideally you take withdrawals that don't impact your tax bracket and don't impact your Medicare premiums. So that's it, guys. I'm going to wrap up, get you guys back to your weekend. Happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day. We're going to be doing more of these lives. I think it's critical that we answer more of your questions here. So we'll be doing more of these here moving forward. I hope this has been helpful. We'll be in touch soon. Of course, we publish a bunch of stuff on YouTube all the time, so you can always watch the videos. In the meantime, again, happy Thanksgiving with holidays and stuff coming up. I know it's crazy, so enjoy the holidays, and we'll go from there. Signing off for now.